Hello and welcome everybody to the Wildstorm Addiction Podcast. This is episode number 5 for the weeks of June 2nd and June 9th. And tonight we have quite a bit of news to go over, and we have 3, hopefully, really cool reviews. But first, Joe has something to say.
Yeah, by the time you guys listen to this podcast, you will notice a lot of changes have gone on. The comicaddiction.com, which we were birthed from, I guess you could say, has split. And basically the site's going to dissolve, and everybody has basically gone and done their own thing. It's kind of like an Image Comic split. It's what we've been joking that it's like. So what we have is Paul Stephen Brown and Anthony Ellis have gone and started their own site called The Cultural Wormhole, and you can find that at culturalwormhole.com. And it's also going to be the new home of the X Addiction Podcast. Mike Smith and Chris Parton will continue to be covering Image Comics at the imageaddiction.net, and that's going to be the new home of the Image Addiction Podcast and everything else that's Image Comics related. We personally are going to continue at the wildstormaddiction.com, so all of our future podcasts will be downloadable there. And we don't plan to break ties with Image Addiction because they do still want us to help them with their retro reviews whenever they do old Wildstorm titles. So just stay tuned to future episodes for more on that. I think the only podcast that suffered was the DC Core Addiction. I think is the only one that's being axed. I think the Avengers Addiction podcast is going to go with Paul Stephen Brown over to Cultural Wormhole, if I'm not mistaken. So lots of news, but don't worry, we're not going to let this keep us down. We're going to keep on trucking. So
Yeah, and we're not rebooting, so this is episode number 5. The next one will be number 6. No big deal.
That's right. No reboots.
I just wanted to go over a quick email that we received to our email account at the wildstormaddiction@gmail.com. And a guy named Jason Page gave us a really cool email, and he says, "Hi guys, my name is Jason Page. I've been downloading and enjoying your show, and I love the interview with Rebecca Isaacs, as did we. He's been," and I'll quote him, "I've been enjoying the hell out of DV8 myself. It was such a surprise to me. I bought it because I'm a Brian Wood fan, but I will continue to read it because of the truly fascinating story and some spectacular art." Totally agree with him. We both love this series. The art is awesome, and Rebecca Isaacs is awesome. So, really cool. He also goes on to say that he hasn't had much history with Wildstorm, but he's really enjoying the show because of the diversity of what we review. And Wildstorm is a pretty diverse publisher, especially with their creator-owned properties and their licensed stuff as well. He also goes on to say that he's been reading a lot of positive buzz about A God Somewhere, and he just wants to know whether we will be reviewing it on the podcast at some point. To answer that question, we most definitely are. Joe and I had discussed this about getting it because, you know, it's another trade to buy in our dismal monetary...
I call it our ramen noodle fund.
Yeah. Our blessings, let's just say. But we did decide to both pick it up, and to be honest, we're not going to review it tonight, but we both read it last night and enjoyed the heck out of it, I'll just say real quick, as a mini review. But we will be doing a full review on the podcast, and Joe has just published on our new site his written review, so if you want to check that out now, it's at wildstormaddiction.com. So check it out and leave a comment, please.
Yes. And also just wanted to take some time. We are 5 episodes in, 6, I guess, if you count episode 0. And there's been a lot of people out there supporting us, and we have given you thanks. But there's just, I want to take a little while to just focus in on some people. We did have that positive email. But a lot of the people at different boards, like, for example, I want to give a shout-out to some of the people at the official Wildstorm message boards. Just want to thank you for the kind words. Camera 23, of course, good old Chris Stryker, Nightcross, who is actually Paul Patane from the Comic Addiction, Echo Prime, Vintage Crime, Titanothrope, Fam2, and newcomer Kara Fan 29, who left us a comment that said, "Love the podcast. Keep the episodes coming. I'm a trade reader, and the only Wildstorm books I'm reading is Astro City. I've never read any other Wildstorm universe proper titles, but I'm starting to become more interested in the titles and the characters thanks to your podcast." And see, that makes us feel really good, because obviously we're doing this because we love comics, we love this company, and we get no royalties or anything like that for doing this. This is just of our own accord, and it feels good that we're helping open up people's ability to go try all these titles. So, and just some other ones across the net over at Clark's Bar, which is run by Chris Stryker. Shout out to IO Destroyed, and yeah. At Comic Book Resources, shout out to Fist of Iron, Twin Pistols, and MGS. And we've even got some people down at ValiantFans.com. Shout out to Rob77, Chiclo, Dr. Solar, Drift, and I can't say this last one. I'll spell it out. It's AGGR1103, who says, "Not really a Wildstorm fan, but I'm down to listen to any podcast that Comic Company or comic book specific. Not a huge fan of comic book podcasts that bounce from Marvel to DC. I'll be checking this one out." So that's cool that he's given us a chance, and looking forward to see what he thinks. And finally, over at RetroJunk.com, Echidna64, who I've got to give an extra special shout out to for taking it upon himself to mail me a copy of This Is Wildstorm Universe number 0 last year from San Diego Comic-Con. That was really cool of him. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. He just took it of his own accord when I mentioned that I couldn't go, that he sent that to me. So double thank you to that, for sending me that. So
that's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
One quick thing, because of the big comic addiction split, and we had to start our own site, we will have a new iTunes feed that you will have to subscribe to. We apologize up front that you have to change your feed to get the Wildstorm Addiction Podcast continued. It's not up right now, but as soon as it is, trust me, we will let you guys know, and hopefully you can get to it quickly and easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of transitions, but just bear with us. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you found us somehow. There's different ways to listen to us, besides just iTunes. You can just download it directly from the site. So, just want to remind you, we do talk about spoilers on the podcast, but the written reviews that are at the site, with the exception of A God Somewhere, are not spoiler-free. And, even God Somewhere, I marked it. It was just too hard not to talk about spoilers in that one. The one bit of Wildstorm news we have is in September, we're getting a new Wetworks one-shot called Wetworks Mutations. It's written by Kevin Graveau, who is the screenwriter of the Underworlds film series, and Christopher Long, and the art is by Julius Gopez, and the cover is by Brendan Badeau, I guess is how you say it. And the solicitation says, roaming the post-apocalyptic American landscape, it's Wetworks like you've never seen them before. With their symbiotes no longer reliably functioning, the team finds themselves running up against Lord Defile, intent upon remaking the ruined Earth in his own vision, which includes experimenting on human prisoners to create a hybrid species. Writer, actor, and co-creator of the Underworld movie franchise, Kevin Graveau, and his co-writer, Christopher Long, bring their unique take to this classic Wildstorm franchise with incredibly detailed art by newcomer Julius Gopez, which you can see his art if you go to Wildstorm's blog, The Bleed. There is some shots of his art from this particular comic, and it looks really good. So really excited that they're giving Wetworks, even if it's just a one shot, at least they're back up on the stands for a little while.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I just checking out the boards this week on DC's boards. Everybody's really excited about this, and like you said, even though it's just one shot, maybe this is just a Wildstorm stab to see if another Wetworks series would work out for them. So hopefully everybody will go and buy it, and maybe we can get another series.
All we can do is hope. All right, Ben, I'll let you go ahead and get into the first review then.
All right. Next up, we have Sparta number 4 of 6, written by Dave Lapham, and art and cover by Johnny Timmons. Wow. I can't believe we're already up to number 4 on this one. Sparta is really, the first 2 issues of this, this is what Wildstorm Addiction started off on. And, man, I don't know what to say about this because I think Joe and I both have mixed feelings about this series. And, here we are starting off with a new website and everything, and we're in issue number 4. This issue starts off with Johnny Franks, who is, he's the man right now. He's the leader and quarterback of the Spartans football team, and we see a little bit of what he's going through. And right off the bat, page number 2, he finds out unconventionally that his wife has committed suicide by hanging herself. And he was in a press conference, really. Well, not even a press conference, but just being interviewed right after the game in the locker room. And that's how he found out. So, not a good way to find out that your wife has just killed herself. Shortly thereafter, and Joe and I have said repeatedly that this book is crazy weird and we don't know how to pin it down. But within a page of finding out that his wife has died, we see him in bed with Wanda. Now,
McLean.
Yeah, Wanda McLean, sorry. Now, Wanda McLean is the wife of our hero. Man, I am just brain farting right now.
It's this series, it's not you.
Yeah, I know. What is his name? What is his first name?
Hey, Godfrey?
Thank you, jeez. She is the wife of Godfrey McLean, the red guy.
Yeah, there you go. Keep it simple.
The red-skinned guy. Yeah, I mean, the name is useless to me, basically. So the first 4 pages, crazy. We got, the lead quarterback finds out that his wife has just died and then is sleeping with, the other quarterback's wife. I don't understand this at all. It just doesn't make sense. Then we flip over to Godfrey, who is in the woods where he likes to be. He's talking about magic, and he drinks some potion, I guess, and he passes out. Now, he does have, the women of Sparta, who I guess aren't married, kind of, that's his crew. That's who's backing him up and doing things for him. And I guess they scoop him up. I don't know. This issue jumps around a lot, and that makes it difficult because this whole story doesn't make any sense. So when this issue, when this book jumps around, it just makes it equally difficult to understand what's going on. Yeah. Honestly, I don't even really want to go through what's going on in this because it's jacked up. At one point, Godfrey wakes up in a teepee from whatever he drank, and Wanda obviously had sex with him while he was passed out. I mean, that's what's implied. He's not too happy about that, by the way. What is his the chick that he actually likes?
Oh man, she's barely in here.
Right, she's in here briefly, but they never say her name. I forget her freaking name. Anyway, she goes to the shop owner, that guy who narrated
Ralphie.
Yeah, Ralphie. He goes after his wife, who totally spazzed out when they didn't get a child from the maestro, and she's been babysitting for the last family that got a child from the maestro. So she kind of went crazy because she obviously wants to snatch this baby. And he actually goes to that house to find Sis, is her name. And she does freak out because she is trying to steal the baby, and he kind of runs away from her because she has an axe and starts swinging it at him.
Yeah, she's pulling a Jack Nicholson from The Shining.
Yeah, it's just crazy town.
Claudia is the name of the other.
Oh, yeah. So Claudia she's apparently there's only one detective in the town, and he has narcolepsy. So she's doing her own detective work on what happened to Johnny's wife, why she hung herself. So she finds the surveillance tape of the house, and I don't know who it is that's with her. Did you see that on the screen?
No, I didn't. I thought it might be Wanda McLean.
I thought it might be too, but you can't really tell.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And I neglected to go back to issue 3 to see if because I think they play that out in issue 3.
Well, I guess we'll find out for certain next issue, but even still, we jump back over to Johnny's game. He's in the middle of a game. It doesn't say if it's the championship game or not, but he's running up the score and apparently is about to break Godfrey's record. And that's when, I guess, Plan B starts, and the power grid blows up and all the electricity goes off. So Johnny's kind of ticked off about that, because that means that the next time they play, they don't start from where the game left off. They have to start over. So he's ticked because, all his touchdowns don't count, and he blames Godfrey for that. Now, in the middle of that, you see that there's no lights on in the stadium, and when he freaks out about that, there's just this really funny panel of all the people in the stadium, and everybody seems to have a flashlight. Like, they knew that was going to happen and the power was going to go off. Who carries a flashlight to a football game?
I didn't even think about that.
There were so many goofy things that I'm like, why would this even happen? Like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, even if it was security, there wouldn't be that many right there with flashlights.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It'd be interesting to see if that's part of the plot, if there was people who were in on this plan.
Yeah, I guess that's possible. So then Godfrey, strolls into the stadium on his horse and all his women behind him. And then the cliffhanger is the maestro, who is the blue-skinned leader of Sparta, I guess he is, rolling into town declaring martial law with all his Nazi friends, waving their flags and rolling in on tanks. And that's what we're left with.
Yeah. And see, my argument is the series should have opened up with this.
That might have helped things.
If the series had opened up with this, we'd be in a different place right now. And just to let the listeners know, we kind of agreed that when we review stuff, just in general, whether we like it or not, we're trying to give you an honest opinion about what we're seeing here. We're not just going to simply tell you that we don't like it, or that, we're trying to be constructive here, and there's, when the story jumps around and it's hard to follow, and the characters, are, you don't find yourself really caring about the characters, for me, reviewing stories, that's a problem. That's why it's so hard for me to continue to read this series, because it's missing out on some of the key elements of a story. And then that's what makes it so hard to talk about, because you just don't want to bash it. I mean, there is, it's got some redeemable qualities. I did enjoy the panel of him riding in on the horse, into the middle of the stadium with a sword drawn.
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, pretty crazy, but it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's just. If we don't care about the characters, it's really hard to care about what's going to happen next to some of them, And
and there's not a single character in this series so far, and we're 4 issues in, that I've even latched onto. I mean, even the main character, Godfrey, like, he's in it so seldomly in the last 2 issues, you're almost like, what's the point? Like, yeah, you can't latch onto a single character. I don't know.
What did you rate it?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't even give it a rating. Like, I don't want to bash it. Like you said, I mean, it's not horrible. It's just difficult to see where he's going with this, and not in the way that leads you to anticipate the next one, just in the way that, maybe I'll get something out of the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I went ahead and gave it a 5, which is just average, because to me, it's met all the average requirements of a comic book. You know, it's not, because it's not horrible. It really is not horrible. It's
it's not.
Yeah, it is. It really is not. But it's just, because one strength I will talk about is I do enjoy Johnny Timmons' art.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. I at the beginning I wasn't sure, but the more that I've seen each issue, I do like it. And shots, like I said, like the one of him on the horse, is really cool. So I am growing accustomed to his art. I am enjoying it more. But like I said, we're just not caring about the characters, and that's just a big pet peeve with me. In stories, I have to care about the characters, or it's just hard for me to keep going. So
yeah, I mean, it is, I guess, an average comic book, but I mean, even the cliffhanger at the end of this one, it didn't really build up to it. It just kind of was there, thrown in, as a last page. Like, the story didn't progress to it. It's there. So it's not like you were anticipating that happening, and it doesn't really lead you to look to the next issue.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next one, which is Gen 13, number 36, which is written by Phil Hester with art by Creditorium. And we have a cover by Phil Noto this time. And as we've said before, this is the bi-monthly Wildstorm Universe title. So this is Phil Hester's second issue. And he makes an interesting choice with this issue, because last issue he basically established which Gen 13 kids he's going to follow. Which out of the original group, we've only got Fairchild and Burnout. The rest are remnants of Gen 14, which are Ditto, Hardbody, Wind Sprint, and Runt. So it's a cool little mixture. I was kind of looking at this and thinking, this kind of reminds me. This is an era right now for Wildstorm where kind of like if you look at the history, for example, of the X-Men, say, there's times when the teams were different, and everybody picks their favorite, And right now, this is the first time, if you don't count Gen 13 Volume 3, where it was a totally different team, this is the first time that the original Gen 13 team has really been changed. So that is interesting. It's some people will probably argue that this is not Gen 13, for them, but I think it's interesting. We do set up a new villain in this one. I couldn't get clarification from anybody if this was an old villain or not. The way that they introduced him, it almost made it seem like he was. But there's a new villain introduced named Kaizen X, which, the name Kaizen obviously makes you think of Kaizen Gamora from recently from the Authority, and in the past he's originally introduced in Cybernary, and he's one of the biggest baddies there is, in the Wildstorm universe. And we know from the end of the Authority, the miniseries, The Authority Prime, that that kind of threw me off, because I thought that this might be Weatherman, the Weatherman's son, who got actually taken over by, help me out here, Henry Bendix, because they look the same.
Well, they have a bald head. I guess that would make them look the same.
Well, they got the same, general, I guess, kind of a generic face. I don't know.
Yeah.
Looks like him. Looks like Bendix to me, but long mustache and stuff. But anyway, so Kaizen, is apparently creating an army, and he's trying to get to what he refers to as the hidden city, which we assume is Pocatello, which is where the Gen 13 kids were trying to get to, which apparently is fabled to be unaffected by World's End. So when we come back to our Gen 13 kids, they have been captured by a church which is run entirely by robots. And they never do say that it's the Church of Gort, which was introduced in the Wildcats. But you'd have to assume that it is, because it's maybe it's a faction of them.
How many robot churches can there be?
Exactly. So their thing is obviously that they want to get rid of all flesh and leave only metal. The one interesting thing that they touch on is that while their robot preacher is up at the pulpit, he's referring to some stained glass windows that show Spartan from the Wildcats. And as he's telling the story about their quote-unquote father, it seems like they're referring to Spartan. And they show a battle between Spartan and Majestic where Spartan loses an arm. And it's an interesting reference because way back in like Wildcats number 2 or 3, somewhere, maybe even 4, the original first 4 issues, Spartan lost an arm during that battle. Majestic wasn't around yet, and they used that later as a plot device for the Killer Instinct crossover they did with Cyberforce. So it doesn't seem like it's the same setup, but I couldn't tell you right away, other than the battle that was more recently in World Ends between Majestic and Spartan. I couldn't tell you where else that could have happened. So we'll see what that signifies. But anyway, this Phil Hester does a good job of giving the Gen 14 kids some life, because when they were introduced in Gen 13 number 26, really just their leader breakdown was the only one that they really focused on, and then after that they just focused on her and how she interacted with Gen 13, and the rest of Gen 14 just kind of fell by the wayside. So here Hester's got a chance to show some of their personality. Mainly Hardbody gets a little bit of a focus here. Gets to showcase his power a little bit. I'm a little confused about his power, though.
I think everybody is right now.
Yeah. Because it seems that he's kind of like Grunge, that he can absorb powers and properties, but that's not very clear. Because basically what he does in order to free them is he absorbs the properties of one of the robots and makes himself look like a robot, and basically claims to be their new messiah. So it's pretty clever to distract them and allow the rest of the kids to escape. But unfortunately, it forces him to stay behind while they escape. So we don't know if he's lost for good or if he's just lost for a while or what. But he's got to stay behind and basically keep up the charade. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do on that. And one little thing about that is that as they're leaving, Fairchild kind of looks over her shoulder, like regrettably, I guess you could say, like as it really bothers her that they had to leave him behind. And it's a panel where she's not saying a thing, no word, no thought balloons for her, nothing, and you just see in her face that you can tell in her face she's lost more friends. She's already lost 3. Is 3 of the original kids or 2? Well, she lost Freefall and she lost Rainmaker because they're out in space with the Authority.
Right, and then Grunge is with Spartan.
Yeah. So you can tell she's hurting because she keeps losing her friends. Meanwhile, the new character we got introduced last issue, Pathcutter, has run into Kaizen X, and he's basically trying to take over the caravan so he can keep building his army, which he figures out that the caravan is on their way to the hidden city, which nobody has told him yet that it's supposed to be Pocatello. But we got a pretty cool moment where Fairchild and the others show up, and Fairchild basically offers to fight him so that they'll leave him alone. So he'll leave them alone. And I think you can see that Fairchild's frustrations have been building up for a long time now, and she basically just takes it out on Kaizen X. And I'm not sure what his powers are, but if you can take a beating from Fairchild, you're pretty tough.
Yeah.
So she basically beats him to within an inch of his life.
Yeah, but he respects her for it.
Yeah, so he says at first. But then when he lets them leave afterwards, he says that he planned that all along, and he actually planted one of his spies on their caravan. So now we end with a cliffhanger. One of the kids is a spy for him. So he definitely has that Kaizen, kind of conniving side.
That's true.
So, but what did you think, Ben, before I tell you my final thoughts on the issue?
I'll just go through some tidbits that I thought were kind of fun. When we flip over to the Church of Gort, I guess, right underneath the stained glass windows panels that the leader is, preaching, there's a shot of the congregation of all the robots, and down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a cool little nod to Star Wars, because that is totally a C-3PO face. C-3PO face. I just thought that was neat. So I wanted to point that out. No, I thought it was a good issue. I really like where this arc is going. And, last issue we got to see a new character, and in this issue we get to see a new character. I almost want to tell them to stop, putting new characters in, because we're trying to just figure out who the Gen 14 people are, let alone introducing all these characters. But I'm sure it's for a reason. I just want to see what that reason is. And you mentioned Breakdown earlier. She also goes by the name of Goo, but don't call her that. Where has she been? I mean, she's not on the carrier. She's not with this crew. Is she, do you have any idea right now?
Yeah, the last we saw of her was at the end of Beatty and Mike Huddleston's run, because remember, she dies to protect the kids.
Oh, that's right.
The last we see of her, she's in one of those stasis tubes, because obviously when the Gen 14 dies.
Right. So she's been rebooted.
Yeah, but nobody. Yeah.
Or recloned, I guess.
So I would assume that the government probably has her, because all the other kids escaped.
See, you're a walking Wildstorm Wikipedia. That's.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun issue. There was a lot of action, and I don't have much to say other than it's a good read. And we talked about last time we reviewed Gen 13 how it was annoying that it's you have to go through a skip month just to get to the next one. I don't have that feeling when I read this one. I was just pleasantly pleased to read it. So I gave this one a 7. I just thought it was a fun read, and I'm not ticked that I don't get it next month, but I am still looking forward to the next issue.
Yeah, no, I gave it a 7 as well. There was a lot of setup here, which is surprising. There was more setup here than there was in the last issue. The last issue I don't feel really had much setup at all.
No, it didn't.
And here all of a sudden we had to take time to set up who Kaizen X is, or what his motivations are, not really who he is. And then we have the adventure, with them escaping the robot church, which takes over, the next third of the issue. And then the final third of the issue is basically Fairchild versus Kaizen X. So basically we sacrificed, the last third of the issue to have a really good fight. So I was kind of a little torn about that, mainly because it is bi-monthly, because I felt the issue went by pretty quick because of that. But it's kind of give and take. I thought it was a really good fight, and Creditorian's art still getting really good every issue. I just think every issue he puts out, it's just that much more solid, I guess. The opening page of the mountainside city and all that, just really detailed. The old witch,
Yeah,
it was really detailed, and So he's just getting so much better. When this ends up in a trade, it's going to be interesting to read it all at once, and every 22 pages you're going to see improvement, as you're reading through the trade. So it's going to be really cool to see that.
All right. Next up, we have The Authority number 23, written by Tom Taylor and art by Mike Miller. The cover, is by Philip Tan, and the other half of this cover is on Wildcats number 24. If you guys listened to the last time we reviewed The Authority, you know how much I enjoyed that issue. It was the first issue I gave a 10 out of 10 on, and especially for a single issue, which is kind of crazy. But this issue just picks up right where that one left off. It starts off with Angie and Shen talking as they're, just walking through one of the corridors. And right away you see that Angie, the engineer, has given or has been able to get some of her personality back from the carrier. So it seems as though she's able to now distinguish between the carrier and her own like soul or personality. So that's cool to see how far away she went, and she was so much like 100% the carrier in the last couple issues, and now she's kind of come back and can interact almost normally with the people around her. I don't know how well it would have went with the rest of the team if she had, still been, the carrier's entity taking over her. So I'm kind of glad that they pulled her back, dialed her back from that. They run into Grifter, who had just knocked boots with Flint. and Tom Taylor is killing me because he is just knocking this book out of the park. I mean, he puts such good humor into each and every character, all their interactions. I mean, every issue you get awesome, fight scenes, good tension, and he just puts these little quips in that just, make it just a brilliant read. I just love it. So I'll let you guys read through that and enjoy that. Then we switch over to Christine Trelane and the High, and she's kind of checking him out after she, re-enabled his powers, I guess. And then they run in, well, I guess because the carrier's still, going about its own path, and the Authority can't really dictate that. Even Angie can't dictate that. They run into like a space, wreckage, I guess like a junkyard for the most part. There's all these different spaceships just kind of strewn about, almost like an asteroid field, and they seem to be traveling right through it. River whispers to the High and says that, he can sense that something's alive in there. And so now that the High is powered up, and he is the hero, and he even says it, because we're heroes, he decides that he's going to go out and check it out and see what, see if he can find anybody that's alive in this wreckage. It's kind of funny because they allude to, his disappearance in the past and how he just hung out for 10 years and, tried to think about what he had done, in the very first volume 1 of Stormwatch, what he had done, and then what he had done, during Armageddon. And he says that he can hold his breath for 4 days just because he was bored. He had time to think about stuff and had nothing better to do. So that was kind of fun. And then as he's about to leave, there's a cool little interaction. The carrier shapeshifts and kind of gives him a hug. And
yeah.
Angie says, I think the ship has a crush on you, which it's kind of funny. You don't know if it's actually the carrier or her personality that does that. So
good observation.
You can't really tell. So the High goes out, and he kind of makes his way through, and they find an Aegean ship, and he finds a heartbeat, or he can hear a heartbeat, and he finds an Aegean laying on the floor who has a justice stone in his chest, which they, obviously think that that's the only thing that can possibly be keeping him alive. And so he finds a mask and slaps it on this guy, and who's unconscious and probably has been for, a millennia, or who knows, thousands of years, or hundreds of years. We have no idea. And he takes him back to the ship and free fall, and tries to stick a needle in him and breaks it off because this guy has like liquid metal running through his veins, and the high heats him up a little bit, and they get an IV in him, get him going. And there's a little shift change, and Grifter and Deathblow come in to take care of him, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
This guy wakes up, and it's interesting because we just read A God Somewhere, but no remorse. This guy just, anybody that was in that ward who was trying to be healed just is dead. Everybody except for Grifter and Cole, and they themselves don't look like they're in good shape. They're just piled on top of one another. And so they realize that something's going wrong. Angie opens up doors for everybody to go in after this guy. And that's what we're left with. A pretty cool pinup of everybody. And Jack goes, "We've got this."
Yeah. Very cool, classic hero moment.
Yeah, it's pretty slick. And not only do we have to deal with him, but right at the end, we have to deal with Mondragon, which is kind of like the Transformers, the Constructabots, because all of those ships that were out in that space kind of form themselves into an octopus shape, and you see the carrier headed right towards it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all know how big the carrier is, and this thing basically dwarfs the carrier.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What did you think of this issue?
Oh, I thought it was a great issue. I mean, it's this series, just like Wildcats, is just so solid. I mean, like you were saying, the writing is great. The humor. I like Mike Miller's art, and it's a shame that he's just here for a couple of issues. But I've been enjoying last month and this month issue, and one thing too about this series right now that I don't think has been in any of the Authority volumes before is that this is that opening shot of them arriving at the junkyard, with all the spaceship parts floating. It's just it's very sci-fi. It's like I have images of Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica all going through my head. When I see stuff like that, it's like I hear John Williams Orchestra, kick up, and that, because that's such a different aspect. I mean, the Authority has dealt with like alternate worlds, and they're usually, going through the bleed, but they'll deal with something that's either on another Earth or, and I'll admit that I haven't read a lot of the past series. I did stop when Ellis, left, and I kind of was in and out of the series after that. But as far as what I have read, I don't remember anything that was like this that focused on space exploration, adventures in space for so long.
No, and none of the other, Wildstorm universe proper titles have either. So, like you said, it's been really cool to see this play out.
Yeah, because I mean, what's cool about it is these characters, which I realize they're not all the original Authority, but the ones that are here, which are Jack, the engineer, and Swift, you still get to enjoy some of them, and of course, you get some of the other members of Wildcats like Grifter, and so it's just cool to see them all interacting. It's like I was saying earlier about the Gen 13 title, and even the Wildcats title. This is just what I consider an era where the teams are different, and it happens in other books, and that's what I'm really enjoying, is seeing the different interactions. We never would have seen this interaction between like Grifter Flint, if we hadn't mixed up the teams, because Grifter would have never been in Stormwatch Team Achilles or even just a regular Stormwatch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's really cool to see that they're taking each character and, building upon years and years and years of history, and they're still fleshing out the characters. And even the carrier, as a character, we're getting to see so much new stuff, of it as a character.
Yeah, because, for the longest time, it was just part of the Authority. It might as well have just been their Batmobile,
Right.
I mean, it wasn't really used like I've seen it used here. And it's cool, too, like you mentioned that they found the Aegean. For those of you who don't know, that's the race of people that the hero called Union is from, which Union hasn't been around for a while, so, a lot of people probably don't know who he is, period. Last time we saw him was in the New Dynamics miniseries. And so it'd be interesting to see if they bring him back now that they're kind of touching on his people again. And speaking of Mike's art, I love the little details, little things that you wouldn't even think about. Like when Freefall is, trying to stick the IV in, she's got her mask pulled up into her hair. I just thought that was such a simple little thing, but it was so cool, because it's so easy to look at the, character sheet and be like, oh, well, she's got a mask. I'll just draw her like that all the time, And so little things like that I appreciate about him that he's doing. And yeah, it's funny, like you mentioned the correlation between a god somewhere and this, because yeah, when the Aegean wakes up, it's a mini massacre.
Yeah, it's bad news. And yeah, like you said, and that's why, last issue I rated it so high. You're right. Mike Miller, he gives each of the characters so much emotion. And, I'm not used to seeing that, especially in the Authority, just from the facial expressions. He just does a great job of everybody. I mean, you see how embarrassed Grifter is.
Yeah.
Walking out of Flint's room. It's fantastic. What did you rate this?
I went ahead and stuck with 8, which I still think is on its way to greatness. I want to see what Mondragon does next issue because, it kind of caught me off guard with what I was kind of expecting a creature, like a flesh and blood creature, I guess, maybe. And, we get this, like you said, it's kind of like the Constructicons from Transformers, they combine all the junk and make this a giant octopus thing. So I'm curious to see what he does.
Yeah, I gave this one a 9, and maybe it's just because I'm riding on a high from the last issue. But I mean, it was great. Cover to cover, it was awesome. And like you said, the setup for next issue, that may be an inanimate object and everything that's coming at him, but we don't know if that's the Aegean, running that. We do have a flesh and blood problem, and we have, outside the carrier has a problem. So now we have, 2 big setups, and I just can't wait for the next one. Why don't you, moving on, why don't you go through and give everybody the other Wildstorm releases?
Okay. Other Wildstorm releases this week, we had Tom Strong and the Robots of Doom #1 come out. We also had Free Realms number 10 of 12. We had Modern Warfare 2, Ghost number 5 of 6. And I've got Resident Evil listed, but didn't we already talk about that last time?
Oh, maybe we did.
I'm pretty sure we did, because I remember telling everybody that, who'd been hanging in there for so long.
Right.
We also have Gears of War Book 1, which came out. And, of course, the one that we've mentioned is A God Somewhere. And like Ben told you, we will be reviewing this, but the written review is already up on the site. And, yes, it's really good. So can't wait to talk about that one.
All right, everybody. That's it for this time. We hope that we will have the iTunes feed up soon, and check us out on the comicaddiction.com website. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.